Can we fade this music out, or does it just cut?
Oh, you're muted.
I'm muted?
Yeah, you're good now.
Huh. Interesting. I unmuted myself. Maybe it remuted me. Whatever. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Stokastic.com NFL strategy show. Taking a look at the pre-contest sim, the contest generator, all that stuff today, and a whole lot more for week 4 slate. I love doing this show. Gives me a good idea of where the leverage spots are. What are some good ways to get different on a slate like this, where you've got a huge total game between the Chargers or between the Bills and the Dolphins. My spot, as you guys know, throughout the week, if Jimmy Garoppolo plays, God, am I going to have mud on my face when that goes up in flames? But this is going to be fun. I haven't looked at anything yet from the Sims perspective. I've looked at the slate thoroughly, as you guys know, from all the shows that we do throughout the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Greg and Neil will be back tomorrow, and then we've got the full slate breakdown on Sunday, 3.5 hours. But this one is going to put a lot of things into focus as far as like, hey, these guys that I like or don't like, where should I be on them, or what type of exposure right now am I getting to them? So hopefully this has been helpful to you guys throughout the season. We're here to run it back. I'm Dave Loughran at Lafayette_D on the Twitter, joined by Greg Ehrenberg at G Ehrenberg DFS. As always, what's up, brother?
Yeah, it's funny because you and I, before the show started, we weren't talking about football. We're talking about Angel Hernandez and how much he sucks as an umpire. I open up the YouTube chat. First thing I see is Jake DeWitt in there talking about Angel Hernandez and how much he sucks as an umpire. So I don't know if our minds are being read or if people are hacking into the YouTube streams, but people talking about the same stuff as us before the show.
Yeah, whatever. First of all, the home plate never should have even thrown that to the third base to Angel Hernandez. And ever. He never should have even thrown that to him.
Dude.
He shouldn't have. Did you listen? If you're a home plate ump, how many times have you seen a check swing in your career? That was the most obvious and evident, we'll call it a clean check swing that I've ever seen in my life. He was not even close to a wrist break. So I don't see why you even ever put that in Hernandez's hands. Once you did, you knew it was a done deal. It was a wrap.
Here's my guess. My guess is that Angel Hernandez has a very short attention span, and you get to points in games where he's not paying attention anymore. Because I see people in chat like Jake DeWitt had said that Angel loves the attention and he's trying to get. I don't think that's what it is. I think that he does not have the attention span to sit through a 3-hour baseball game. So he just stops paying attention, and then all of a sudden he has to do something, and he's got like a 50-50 chance to get the call right, and he just guesses.
It's possible. But
that's what I think it is.
But at that point, in Philadelphia with Bryce Harper at the plate, you have to say it's not a swing. That's the problem. If it's Bryce Harper at the plate in Philly, you have. But by the way, I love that Bryce Harper had that much emotion in a purely meaningless game as well. Like, I'm pretty sure they had already locked up the number 1 wild card spot, right? The day before.
Yeah. So their wild card spot already locked up.
The top spot in the wild card, I mean.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. I'm pretty sure. So the game was meaningless. And we also saw like the day before, the Phillies had rested a bunch of players. And so Angel Hernandez also apparently thinks it's meaningless. He's like, who cares what the calls are? We just do whatever we want over there. He'll jerk himself off during the game, and then he goes home at the end, and he'll screw up calls tomorrow as well.
Well, happy to have you guys with us. Very happy to have you guys with us. Josh said Bryce Harper is a super douche. No, he's not, dude. What are you talking about, man? What are you talking? Get out of here with that nonsense. But Josh, I still love you. Josh and I disagree on many things, but he's one of the few civilized people out there that can have an argument without it, becoming apoplectic and breaking down and relying on emotions to form an argument. Anyway, hit that thumbs up, guys. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the channel. It goes a really long way for us. We appreciate you in advance. Also, leave a comment down below if you're watching or listening after the fact. Always open to suggestions and comments. When we've got like new shows such as this one that we started this year, if there's anything you'd like to see, let us know. And check out our podcast stuff, fellas. Not just this, because everything we do here that has any semblance of a shelf life goes straight on to podcast, whether it's Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever, ancient podcast platform you still listen to. Believe it or not, we're there. But we have podcast exclusive stuff. And I think if you haven't listened yet, you're really going to like it. We keep it to 25 minutes, 30 minutes tops. single entry 3-max contest strategy. We do that on Tuesday, Ben Rassa and myself. And then Greg, after this show, and I are going to hit the podcast exclusive afternoon slate. If you don't listen today, that's cool. Bookmark it for Sunday afternoon. Set a reminder in your phone. It's short. You're not going to find this content anywhere else out there. And I must say, Greg, last week we talked about how much Rondale Moore the Sims were giving us. And that was the case when Sunday rolled around because he helped me out immensely in that game. Clearly my lowest owned guy that went off or had a solid game. And then the week before, we spent most of the time talking about Daniel Jones and Giant stacks. Now I just have to put those pieces together for my own damn lineups and make it work.
Yeah, you gotta, which is always, especially the late slates when it's like 3 games it was last week. It's very easy to be like the 1v1 swap away from the nuts. And you always convince yourself you almost had it, but this is the week that we're actually going to have it. So check out the afternoon podcast where we give out the nuts.
Absolutely. For real though, I mean, I think the process thus far has been spot on, especially with, I think I mentioned it to Eric the other day. I'm a big fan of the afternoons. I love the short slates. I really do. I love short NFL slates. I think you can get really weird. This week, there's 3 of them again: Chargers, Raiders, and then Dallas, New England, San Francisco, Arizona. Remember the past couple, and we're going to dive straight into the Sims right now, but we've had multiple slates now where you're not fully writing off teams, and I'm not saying that at all, but there's clear go-to spots, and then you're building around them. This is a unique one too, because that Chargers and Vegas game is going to already does have a really high total. You know it's going to be popular, along with the San Francisco 49ers ownership as well.
Yeah, and it's also kind of an interesting slate that we're about to break down, look at some of our exposures, is in all of the other slates we've had so far, if you look at like our top stacks tool, we've had teams like the Vikings, for instance, had a slate. I can't remember if this was last week or 2 weeks ago, where they had like a 20% chance to be the top scoring stack. And we don't have anything like that this week. The odds in our top stacks tool are much flatter, which ultimately makes me think that we're going to be getting to much flatter quarterback exposures and stack exposures overall. So going to be a little bit more spread out. It'll make for different builds than we've had the first few weeks of the season.
No question. And when we do that podcast, I like to go in and I'll run the Sims for like the play action to give everybody that plays that an idea. You know, we'll do like favorite the top 20, do a flatter payout. Greg will go and run it with like a milli maker in mind. So we try and hit it from all angles. You ready to get into this?
Let's do it.
All right. So first things first, we've got 12 games, and I just want to kind of lay the foundation for those of you guys who are wondering, you know, what this looks like. Maybe you haven't delved deep into the slate yet. You have the London game, which is why we only have 12 again this week, but 53.5 point total between Miami and Buffalo. Minnesota, Carolina is 46.5. They're 4-point favorites. Then you have a lot of low 40 games: Baltimore, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Houston, Tampa, Saints. There's a couple of other ones in there as well, but 48.5 for Raiders and Chargers. Broncos and Bears is up to 46.5. Rams and Colts is at 46. I'm curious, without looking at anything, what our exposures are going to look like to some of these low scoring games.
Yeah. I've already recorded some VODs, so I have a general sense of where we're going to get to here. So like if I guessed, I would very much be cheating in terms of what I think we're going to be getting to, because I've already had a little bit of insight, look under the hood here. But we'll see your reaction to it, and maybe things have changed since I last recorded.
Certainly possible. So let's do it. Jacob behind the controls today, and this is more of an intensive show for a producer, so shout out to Jacob. Let's go. I'm trying to think how I want to play this first. Do we want to look at some of the top lineups, or should we favorite 150 and look at exposures first?
Let's look at, well, we could do both. Since we're on the page, we might as well look at what the top lineup is, which appears to be a Jameis Winston Saints stack.
Yeah. Against this former team.
We got Winston, who really a god of fantasy, because he's almost so bad that he's good for fantasy at times, because there have been games where nothing's been better for Jameis Winston's fantasy output. Then he marches down the field, he throws a pick six, he gets the ball right back, and he gets to launch another 15 passes up in the air. on one of his drives. So one thing we've always seen with Winston, kind of regardless of where he's been playing, has generally been that he takes chances downfield. He's a very boom bust type target for fantasy purposes. And he's somebody who pretty clearly has a big ceiling for DFS because, I mean, we've seen that whenever it is that he's been under center at quarterback. So Derek Carr out due to the shoulder injury. Winston's going to be in there at QB starting. I am a little surprised, though, that our number one overall projected lineup did end up with Winston in it.
Yeah, I may come in hot with that D boost up on ROI on this, but maybe not. I have no problem getting the some Winston, but this game, and this is where I try not to let my biases get too crazy. These Saints Tampa game, the last few times they played each other have been egregiously low scoring. I mean, like super low scoring. I remember last year, I'm pretty sure Winston was at quarterback. It was a 2010 game. And that was like a 13-10 game up until the final minutes. The time before the play before that was like a 9-0 game. Again, I'm not saying that this is something that you need to look at for, or, lean heavily, put a ton of weight into for this week. But the Jameis stacks, and then like another thing, I don't love I don't love the Mike Evans run back, even though it doesn't appear that we're getting much of that, Greg. Like, it doesn't appear that the Mike Evans, Marshawn Lattimore, that is one spot. That's a hill that I will actually die on, that I just don't want to get to a lot of Mike Evans against Marshawn Lattimore on a 12-game slate.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. What is the projected ownership for Mike Evans this week? I'm going to pull that up right here. We've got Mike Evans projected for... Yeah, he's not expected to be all that popular this week.
No, and he has been fantastic. Don't get he's clearly Baker Mayfield's top option without question. And he has a target share that's north of 30%, 31.5%. No one else is above 21%. I get that. But yeah, let's see. Are we getting too much of him?
Nope. Not getting to
that's
Mike
interesting.
Evans.
So we're getting a lot of Winston, just not a lot of run backs here. I did see some Winston +2 and a run back. Who are the Rachaad White run backs?
Yeah, so Rachaad White, which I don't mind either. Rachaad White's on the field almost every play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's involved in the run game. He's involved in the pass game. He's extremely inefficient, but sometimes volume exceeds that, where we saw that even, was it last week where Rachaad White had just 1 million touches and ended up getting there from a fantasy standpoint?
Against the Eagles on Thursday. Against the Eagles on Monday night.
Yeah, so I mean, those kind of scenarios are always going to be live for Rachaad White. And yeah, this is like, here are his game logs so far this year. 14 carries for 38 yards, 17 carries for 73 yards and a touchdown, 17 carries for 39 yards. But he's also been targeted 10 times through 3 games this year. So you're looking at a guy who's going to get like 15 to 18 carries every game. He's also going to get targeted 3 to 5 times in the passing game. It's a lot of volume. Is he going to be efficient? Almost certainly not. He's averaging 3.1 yards per carry. When you're on the field that often, you're going to have a chance to find success at somewhere. Like, we saw that last night with David Montgomery. Montgomery was super inefficient last night, and the Lions just not stop giving him the football, and they just kind of forced his way to a good fantasy game. I think that's going to happen a lot with Rachaad White this season.
Yeah, especially because there was a lot of talk of Sean Tucker maybe, usurping him at some point. That was not the case. Sean Tucker was hardly involved in that last game. You know what I do want to look at? I see a Jimmy Garoppolo lineup in there. Mm-hmm. Let's see our Jimmy Garoppolo lineups here.
By the way, I like Garoppolo quite a bit this weekend.
Dude, I know it's going to backfire. I've been saying it constantly all week. It's going to backfire, assuming he plays. He was a limited participant yesterday. Just a target share with Adams and Myers right now. I like Josh Jacobs too. I like Josh Jacobs a lot. With how bad he's been, I still intend on getting to a good amount of Josh Jacobs. I hope I do at least. He's at 12%. But yeah, I'd love to see what the Jimmy Garoppolo lineups look like. The first one I saw, which looked like it was top 10, had Evans and Myers. I feel like it has to. It has to have at least one of those guys no matter what, if you're stacking Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't think there are any exceptions outside of that. So Let's see this first. Let's see the 203 simmed ROI. There it is. Okay, this is what I was looking for. There it is, Greg. It's with the Keenan Allen run back. These are all really high simmed ROI too. These are all like top lineups.
The other thing too, and you had kind of mentioned it, if Jimmy Garoppolo has a big game, it's the path to success for those lineups to me is fairly simple because he kind of only targets two guys. He targets Devontae Adams. He targets Jacoby Myers. The 1 week, the exception is when Jacoby Myers was hurt, when he was dealing with the concussion. So if you have the big game for Garoppolo, it's just really easy to see the path for those lineups winding at the top of GPPs. You know, when you have a quarterback, even like I like Justin Herbert this week, but I'm not totally confident who's going to step in and replace the secondary wide receiver role behind Mike Williams. Like it could be Palmer, it could be Johnston. I'm not positive. I do know if Garoppolo has a big game, what it's going to take for those lineups to get to the top of the field. It's just going to be Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, because that's the only guys he's throwing to.
Yep, 71% target share combined in the 2 games that they've played together. Some of these lineups are really interesting. I see a couple QB +2 plus the run back, and I'm very happy to see that it's Jacoby Myers and it's Adams because that's the answer. Are there any other? I'm trying to see if there's any non-Adams Myers pairings. I don't see it. No.
Yeah, probably not. Let me think, like, who else could it even possibly be that would be like DFS relevant that would get into lineups?
There isn't one. Hunter Renfrow isn't getting used. Hooper's not getting used. Michael Myers not getting used. None of these guys are getting used at all. The third highest target share behind Adams and Myers is Josh Jacobs at 11%.
Yeah, I just checked because when I had recorded videos earlier for the YouTube channel, I just went and pulled up because I still had the lineups up on my screen and just kind of looked like, all right, what was my Raiders exposure? And I didn't have exposure in my top 150 lineups to a single player on the Raiders outside of Garoppolo, Adams, Myers, Jacobs. So it's just those 4, which I'm pretty cool with.
Me too. I don't want to get elsewhere there. Let's go to exposures. I want to see what our stack exposures look like on the top right. Yeah, if we want to go to did we favorite, I guess, 150, right?
Yeah.
So let's see what stack exposures are popping. All right, so a decent, and you know what? To be fair, the whole Jameis thing, sort that by QB +2. The whole Jameis thing actually. Do I want him to? Do I want this to be my highest owned stack? Probably not. Like there are certain things that I would like to see, and that can change leading into Sunday. But Chris Olave and Michael Thomas this season, 31% target share, 26%, 31 for Olave, 26% for Michael Thomas. I also don't anticipate any of that changing with Winston taking over for Andy Dalton. For Derek Carr. That I don't think that makes a huge difference to me. We know that in Tampa Bay it was Godwin and Mike Evans for him, right? Like always. And I don't see why any of that would change this year. So there is, while it's not as concentrated a path as the Raiders, like you were saying with Garoppolo, it is still a pretty concentrated target share. The problem is Ben likes to say, this could turn into a bizarro freak show. And then you've got Taysom Hill vulturing touchdowns. You have Alvin Kamara back in the mix this week. That is the issue I have, and that's why I generally don't love to get to a ton of stacks for the Saints, especially if their number one quarterback is out, because things can go sideways so quickly, and even if they have a decent, efficient game passing, you still need things to work in the red zone and not have this weird freakish shit happening as we saw all of last year.
I'm going to have exposure to Jameis Winston this weekend. It's not going to be, see, what's the number here? We have 13% Winston. If I have my best guess, I would say I probably have like 4 to 5% of Winston as opposed to this number. He's somebody to get to, but like, I don't want to be, as you had said, Lofty, I don't want to be like heavily invested where my day is going to be like hinging on Jameis Winston.
Exactly. What do you think makes more sense? To deboost these And by the way, guys, with the Sims tool, if you're new to this, we're using the pre-contest simulator. So you generate all the content. I'm going to have Greg explain exactly how it works in a second, and he'll keep it quick. But when you see the ROI boost, you can boost ROI, and it's not that you're getting more exposure to a player. It's bringing those lineups higher up, and you'll see that with the arrows up and down. Same thing if you boost them down. Do you think it makes more sense to deboost Winston stacks or just go in and manually check the top simulated ROI stacks of each player that you like and find yourself a balance that way?
So it's funny. There's two different ways that I think you could do this best. You could either do the stack boost or the player boost. For football, if we're looking at quarterbacks, I don't really think it's going to make a massive difference between the two because basically all of our top lineups are stacks, right? It's not like we're having naked Jameis Winston lineups. So all of the lineups that have him are stacks. So with that in mind, if you're going to be doing boost of other players, I think it makes more sense to do the player boost just so you kind of have them all housed under one tab. But if we just go into Winston and let's do like a negative 30% ROI boost here, Jacob. And I'm just curious when we do this, then click boost ROI, how that changes our exposure to Winston. So you're still going to have to go to the lineups page and then unfavorite the lineups and then resort them by sim ROI though. They're probably all the way to the left. They're probably still sorted in order, but just in case, they could just be me OCD. But yeah, then go favorite top 150. And now let's check how much different our exposure is to Winston. Yeah, so now we only have 8% exposure to Winston as opposed to the 13% before, which to me is a much more reasonable number.
Absolutely. I also love that we have 11% Garoppolo. And of course, when I say I love that we're getting this, it's you know what I'm saying, where you don't want to manipulate this to where you're only getting what you want. But I don't think it's crazy to be like, hey, I'll play the highest sim lineups of this guy. I just don't want this many of them, right? Like I'm fine with 5% of them. I don't want 15% of them, but I'm still going to play the top projected lineups in our tool.
Yeah. And that's because this isn't like a massive change we made with Winston. We just kind of made it like, hey, we're going to get to a few less Jameis Winston lineups. You're kind of, if you're doing like crazy ROI boosts with every single player, you're probably doing too much. And ultimately the machine is going to know more than we do. But like little tinkers like this, where you might be like, hey, I don't want quite that much of Jameis Winston. Like, I think that's more of a reasonable change to make for your own preferences.
Rob Arnold with $100 super chat. Thank you, Rob. That's awesome, man. Appreciate it. Good morning, gents. Longtime subscriber and member. Just want to say to the Stokastic team to keep up the good work. I got into the Millie Chop last night using strictly the tools and the Sims. I know that was north of $17,000. So that's amazing, man. Totally unnecessary super chat, but really appreciate you. Makes me happy to see that it was using the Sims tool, though. That's the best part about all this, because that's what we want. We want people to win using this tool. And it was an interesting lineup that chopped for sure. Montgomery at top. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jordan Love, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, and Lions defense. But yeah, that's awesome, man. And the link to all of our tools, guys, to the Sims package is in the description. The Sims Max package, which is the same thing as the Sims data package, except the Sims data package is a lot cheaper because you can't generate as many contests in the contest generator before you sim them. If you're wondering what that means, you can always check out Greg's videos and stuff on the channel. But essentially, it's better if you're playing, like if you're 150 maxing and you're playing these larger field contests all the time, probably makes more sense to go with the Sims Max. But check those links out in the chat and in the description. By the way, no more add-ons necessary. You can create your lineups, generate the lineups, sim the lineups. There's no more add-ons. Like you have to get the simulator separate from ownership and projections and premium Discord and the lineup generator and the boom bust top stacks tool, all that stuff included in the one single package for NFL. So once you get that, it's not like, do I need anything else? No, everything, 100% of it is all right there. And yeah, ultimately I see Rob Arnold taking down a chop in a huge Millie contest. Makes me feel good about the way things are going. So if you ever have any questions, hit me up on Twitter. My DMs are open. You can hit Greg up and ask him as well. He's always happy to answer questions. But links down there in chat and in the description if you want to check out the tools and be like Rob Arnold.
Yeah,
anyway.
just don't ask Josh Engelman or Adam Scher for any help with anything. They'll spit on you. But Loughran, you could ask us for help.
We're happy to help you guys out, or at least point you in the right direction. All right, so one other thing I want to look at. I want to look at individual exposures. We saw the stack exposures, and I actually want to revisit that in a moment. But we saw the stack exposures. Let's look at some individual exposures here, Jacob, and see where these guys are popping. I want to see where we're at as far as how much above the field we're coming in on. See, like Miles Sanders, there's for me I'm just I'm starkly opposed to this, which is hilarious because I've been the biggest Miles Sanders truther for years now, but that's only because he runs behind the Eagles or ran behind the Eagles line. Ton of Keenan Allen. Freiermuth is the one that I'm curious on your take here because the tight end position is god awful. Like Devontae Adams, love it. A lot of spots up there that I feel very good about. Even paying a little bit of a premium for that Eagles defense after seeing Sam Howell get sacked 9 times last game by the Bills. But what do you make of that Freiermuth exposure that we're getting? Excuse me. When you're 46% at a really bad position.
I don't mind it, particularly because if you look at the pricing of the Steelers this weekend, it's like and this is not just the case for DraftKings. It's DraftKings, it's FanDuel, it's Owner's Box as well. And if you guys sign up at Owner's Box, we still have the deal available. You get 1 free week of all of our football tools. But one thing that really stands out to me about the Steelers everywhere, across every single site this weekend, is that it's like the pricing is never really adjusted for the Deontay Johnson injury. So a lot of times we'll look at injuries and we'll say like, hey, how does the Mike Williams injury impact the Chargers? And we try to figure out like, all right, we want to get to Keenan Allen. We want to get to Quentin Johnston. Do we want to get to Palmer? And we try to figure out like which value guys we like. The reality with the Steelers that even though Deontay Johnson's injury is not new, none of these guys have been priced up. So you've got Kenny Pickett, who I think is a cheap quarterback with some upside this week. He's one of our top value plays in the top stacks tool. And then you look at all of his pass catching options, they're still underpriced. They haven't been adjusted for the absence of Deontay Johnson. So I like getting to Freiermuth. I like getting to Pickens. I think Calvin Austin's a good flyer for GPPs as well. I know you only asked me about Freiermuth, but I think the same logic applies to all of the pass catchers on the Steelers. They're too cheap with Deontay Johnson out. Yeah,
they are. And it is a Houston team that is probably playing north of expectations, like above their skill level right now. I like what I see from Stroud. I love Tank Dell. But defensively, that team seriously still has some issues. Kenny Pickett did look a little bit better last time out. I mean, look, the bar was low. But my only concern is with a Freiermuth. What does tight end exposure look like, Jacob? This will put a lot of things into perspective for us because this is my issue, Greg. Do we not have some concern that with the position being so bad and so many of these tight ends being such low volume players? And by the way, my assumption is if Deebo Samuel doesn't play, that George Kittle at 5,100 we're going to certainly get a good amount of exposure to him. My only concern is that I don't see a noticeable difference between the majority of tight ends that are listed in our exposure pool.
Yeah, so I mean, if you look through, and we are fairly spread out past Pat Freiermuth, right? He's in about half our lineups, and then there's just a bunch of guys that are kind of in there, and I assume a lot of them is just correlation with quarterbacks. Like I would assume the Tyler Higbee lineups, it's probably with Stafford at quarterback. Probably the Granson lineups, a lot of those, it's Anthony Richardson at quarterback, and so on and so forth as you go down with the other exposures here. So the reason we're getting so much Freiermuth is because it looked to me at first glance that, well, number one, like I said before about him being too cheap, but then also Kenny Pickett is our most exposed quarterback, I believed, in this set of lineups that we built. So he just kind of correlates with those. I don't really have a massive issue with taking some sort of stand on Freiermuth and getting into him a whole bunch, particularly because not just he's too cheap, but he's not all that expensive or popular either, where, you know, he's projected for 11.5% ownership. The tight end position sucks to the point where it might not even matter all that much. Like week one, the Millie making lineup on FanDuel had Isaiah Likely in it, who had 1 catch for 7 yards.
Yeah. Oh man. I understand. Can we sort by exposure? Yeah, that's got to that's going to flatten out as we get more news. There's no way it doesn't on 150 lineups, unless it doesn't. And then Fryermuth's what, like $3,300 or something.
So something else about this too that's kind of interesting. Do you see Jacob? There's the right to the left of exposure. There's the simulated player ROI. So look at the ROI of the tight ends that we've projected for this week. If we sort by that column, we have Pat Freiermuth. All lineups with Pat Freiermuth had a 31.3% simulated ROI. Kyle Granson lineups, which is going to be heavily influenced by Anthony Richardson being a quarterback, we're projecting really well this week. And he correlates with Richardson, so he has a 7.3% simulated ROI. Every single other tight end on the slate is rating out as a negative ROI play overall across our lineups. So look at how much better Freiermuth is projecting at tight end than every other player just from the lineups he's in, how much more profitable they are than every other lineup.
It is true, and that's why we're getting so much of them. Let's see what our running back exposures look like as well, because this is a slate that has a ton of good running backs in that 5K range, a lot of good running backs in that, not a ton in the 6K, but like low 7K, guys like Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs that are coming off, underwhelming seasons, to say the least. Like, that's putting it lightly.
Yeah.
But then you have, we'll see about the Eckler news. We'll see whether or not he's going to be active. Tony Pollard, I assume, will be a decent leverage spot at his projected ownership. Here we go. Okay, so a ton of Sanders, Rachaad White with that volume. DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard, 17%, pretty much matching the field on Javonte Williams. I like that. Yeah, I don't have an issue with any of this. 10% James Cook, I'm fine with. He's going to need to break one because he's not getting goal line carries. We've seen that much. Mixon at 4%, Kyren Williams. So very little Derrick Henry right now.
Mm-hmm.
I probably would go out of my way. This is just me. And that's why I like this tool. You can make decisions if you want. I don't think you need to just do everything completely untouched. Maybe I'm wrong. But I'll probably boost some Josh Jacobs if I'm not getting any of him. I just think it's one of these spots where, yes, he's getting some ownership, but this is a guy who last year was a, mid 8K and up fantasy player. I think there's nuance to this too, because the guy wasn't at practice or training camp. So maybe it just takes a couple of weeks to get back in the groove. It's the NFL, man. So in a good matchup with the second highest total on the slate, Jacobs is the one guy among all of these that kind of stands out to me where I go, I'd like to get at least a little bit of Josh Jacobs in my exposures.
And then, I wouldn't have an issue boosting Josh Jacobs, which also might get us a little bit more of the Garoppolo lineups as well, just because I assume there's probably some Josh Jacobs lineups that have Garoppolo in them as well as a potential stacking option, particularly because Josh Jacobs, at least last year, was involved in the passing game. But talking a little bit about Miles Sanders, if we scroll back up here, Jacob, and yeah, again, this is a lot of Miles Sanders. He's in 3/4 of our lineups, but the guy's been crazy involved this year, especially in the passing game. He was targeted 9 times last week. So we talked about Rachaad White and all of his involvement in the Buccaneers game, and I kind of think you're getting similar stuff here out of Miles Sanders, because last week he had 9 carries for 24 yards, but ends up being a great play because he's targeted 9 times in the passing game, because he's getting goal line work, so he ends up scoring a touchdown. So you've got this guy, Miles Sanders, averaging 3.4 yards per carry, but he's averaging 7 targets per game. So he's producing fairly well at the running back spot here, and we'll see what ends up happening as we get closer to lock. Maybe players get ruled out and other running backs become viable. So like last week when we were doing the show, Lofty, we had Miles Sanders also as our most rostered running back, and he was also expected to be popular last week. And then by the time we got to Sunday, his ownership had come down a decent amount by the nature of more news coming out. I'm not saying that I love that I would have 3/4 of my lineups with Miles Sanders, but I still think he's a very good play overall if we're going to assume that he's going to keep getting 15 to 20 touches per game.
Yeah, for sure. The only difference there is if we haven't projected a 15% ownership and DeAndre Swift at 11% and 3 times the ownership, that's interesting to me. I mean, Tony Pollard exposure looks good. Very underweight on Kyren Williams right now. Christian McCaffrey, I mean, that's got to just be a price play because of how much of those Devontae Adams lineups we were getting. And I'm go actually, you know what? Matter of fact, Jacob, can we look at quarterback exposure? Or sorry, wide receiver. I just want to see how many of the expensive. Okay. So there you go, Greg. Like Keenan Allen, 7,900, Adams, 8K. Nakua's up there now in price. Stephon Diggs, 23%. We're getting him. He's expensive. Deebo Samuel, scroll down a little bit. Let's see how many of these other expensive guys we're getting.
Olave, Pittman to an extent. He's more like
Hill.
upper mid-range, but still Olave is expensive.
Tyreek
Hill
Hill
is expensive. Yeah, so in general, it looks like paying up at wide receiver is what's projected to be optimal in the Sims, and then going cheaper at running back.
Yep. Outside of Tony Pollard. But also, a lot of this can change. Does Deebo end up not playing? Does Eckler end up playing? Like, I think those can change a lot. I don't think Deebo is going to play. And if that's the case, then you start seeing, I would imagine, more George Kittle in a spot like this at 5,100. Ayuk's been limited. So if I had to guess that he plays and Deebo doesn't, but George Kittle last game, outside of not finding the end zone, was excellent. And he's a great yards after the catch guy. We have him at 2.7%, but can you right? You have to think his projection goes up considerably if Deebo's out.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I'm just like kind of guessing off the top of my head, but we probably have like a 20-ish% projection boost to George Kittle, which would have him coming in right around 13 fantasy points. And it's funny because DFS is so pricing sensitive, especially NBA overall things, but NFL as well. But if you had George Kittle with a fantasy projection of like 13 fantasy points, I bet that you end up getting him just by those couple extra fantasy points. He probably ends up in like 20% of lineups instead of 2%.
For sure. Cornelius asked, when you boost or deboost players, how do you get it to update in the lineups? So what I do, I just unfavorite them afterwards and then favorite 150 or 20 again or whatever you're playing.
Yeah.
So like make sure though, when you're doing this, if you're boosting or deboosting, you'll see after that you have to hit boost ROI and then it'll take effect, right? Like you see that down there on the screen, boost ROI, hit that after you make, yeah, right there. And then you can do stack boosts too. So if you go in the stack boosts, you click that, you can stack in, or you can boost or deboost individual stacks. Do you use that feature for stacks or do you just do players?
I usually do players. For baseball, I use the stack boost.
Sure.
For football, less so. I'll just use the quarterback boost for the individual quarterback because basically all of our lineups are stacked anyway, so it has the same effect.
Oh, guys, before we get into a few more things here that I think will be helpful, Bet365 just brought back, it's the best promo in the world. Well, let me say the country. You know, I don't stay apprised of, sports betting promos in Poland, but I can tell you that the whole bet $1, get $365 is without question the best pro. Even if you're someone that doesn't love sports betting, but you're in the state of Colorado, Ohio, Iowa, Virginia, New Jersey, and now Kentucky that just launched, any of those 6 states, you're lucky. If you're not in those states, that kind of sucks. But any of those 6 states, you click that link down below or in chat, you bet $1 when you sign up, you get $365 in bet credits on Bet365. It's the easiest win you'll have all year. It's easier than DFS. It's easier. I mean, it's easier than anything you're going to do. Making a bowl of cereal for breakfast is more difficult and more time consuming than betting $1 and getting $365. Plus, if you're eating something like Cinnamon Toast Crunch, which to be fair is absolutely delicious, you're just doing bad things to yourself. This is doing good things to yourself. $365, guys. Colorado, Iowa, New Jersey, Virginia, Kentucky, and whatever other one that I mentioned earlier and I forgot now. All 6 of those states, bet 1, get 365. You sign up, it takes a minute, 2 minutes So essentially think of it this way. You're getting $365 in 2 minutes by signing up, you'd have to deposit 10, but only bet $1 of that 10. And whether it wins or loses does not matter. That bet settles. You got $365. It's awesome. Clearly awesome. I should need to say no more. Link in the description and chat if you're doing so. And my recommendation, last thing, if you're going to, Greg, I always like, if you're going to do this, put the $1 bet on a massive, massive long shot. Like, I'm not an advocate of 20 leg parlays in most cases, but why not go wild? I'm not betting a side. I'm not betting a spread with $1. I'm going to go all out, because if that does happen to hit, you're already getting $365. If it doesn't, who cares?
Yeah. And by the way, I'm going to go a step further than you, because I'm more in tune with the international sportsbook offers. This is not only the best offer on the planet, Lofty, it's the best one in the galaxy. This is the best one you're going to find out there. I'm not going to say the universe, because I'm not sure what's around outside of the Milky Way, but within like Earth, Neptune, Saturn, we could debate whether Pluto's a planet or not. It's the best out there. Bet $1, win 365.
It's a strong take.
Yeah, hey.
Must be 21 years or older to gamble. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. But yeah, check it out, guys. It's an awesome promo. Link down there, like I said, in the description. If you're watching after the fact, or if you're watching now, it's in chat. All right. So a couple of things that I want to look at. First off, I saw that Eagles exposure, and that was surprising to me, because last week we did get a decent amount of Bills in the Sims. That was good, but also a lot of cheap ones too. Definitely go to defenses, Jacob. I want to see what that looks like. I'm really curious to see if we're just not getting to the cheap defenses this week, which would be interesting given that there's so many good, expensive skill players as well.
Yeah, the defense is I don't know I spend so little time thinking about defense when it comes to my DraftKings and FanDuel play. It's just kind of like whatever defense I get to, it's cool with me. I hate it. I think it's the most random position out there. So unless something is like coming up, some sort of crazy, like if there's a team that's projected for like 30% ownership, like, maybe that might be something that impacts my thinking in some way. But in general, if like the data is just saying like, hey, Eagles are 8% owned, they should be 34%. Like I'm so unopinionated on defenses. I just hate them.
So do I, but that's kind of not what I was getting at. I'm more so referring to something that Ben had brought up. I think it was on the podcast exclusive when we were talking about single entry and 3-max, where he was saying that the viability of playing those top tier defenses, the ones that you have to pay the most for, is something that a lot of people, particularly when you're hand building, that people don't ever want to do. And a lot of times they'll just, bite the bullet and go for some of those cheaper defenses, which in many cases makes a ton of sense. Don't get me wrong. But what I was saying, the interesting thing was that we're getting 34% exposure to the Eagles on a slate with a lot of really good high priced players. And they're the second highest priced defense on the slate. And I don't have an issue with it even remotely.
Yeah, got you. And yeah, I see it that way as well. Like for me with defenses, when I used to hand build, what I would do is I'd fill out my entire lineup and I would just play whatever defense came in next to fill out the rest of the lineup. And yeah, we do have a matchup here. You mentioned it before. We saw Sam Howell, he sacked 9 times last week or something like that.
And now 19 times on the year, which is 6 more than any other quarterback.
Yeah, and you've got an Eagles defense that is one of the best front sevens in the NFL. It would not at all be shocking to see multiple sacks, multiple turnovers. So it's an expensive defense, but it's not anything I see as like problematic that we're getting to them as much as we are.
Me neither. I like looking at this stuff sometimes. I'm generally never going to, defense is a spot where I'm generally never going to make any boost to, Greg. Like I usually just let it go. I really don't touch it. And I don't intend on touching it this week. It's just usually you're not seeing that high priced of a defense getting that much exposure. But it's a good spot. They're 8-point favorites. They're $4,100. A lot of leverage there if you're getting over the field. Colts, Panthers, Chargers, Ravens, Browns, Bucks. To your point, I could look at that and it does nothing. I have no emotional reaction to anybody or any team when looking at that.
Yeah. Hey, well, we'll see. But you are a little bit lower on Miles Sanders this year than last year. So
what's that mean?
That maybe your bias is on the Eagles defense. You don't even realize it's happening, maybe.
No. What's going to happen is that the Eagles are going to go get crushed and everyone's going to go, what the hell happened? But no, if this was the Cowboys defense against the Cardinals last week, I would have said the same thing. Fortunately, I didn't get a lot of them, but yeah, we saw what the Bills did to them. I think it's possible the Eagles do the same. I want to one more time look at stack ROI, the middle tab up there, and see what we're getting out of that. Because, all right, so let's just sort all of them top down one at a time. Wow, Kenny Pickett, the highest simmed. That has to just be a price thing, right? And then allowing us to jam good players around Pittsburgh stacks.
Yeah, so it's also, we have the Steelers projected to be one of the more pass happy offenses. If I just look at our projections, we have the Steelers projected to run the football 43.1% of the time, which means on the other side, we're expecting them to throw the football 56.9% of the time, which does make them one of the teams that are more pass prone than any other teams in the league. And then it also goes back to what we're talking about at the top of the show, where Deontay Johnson is out. It's not his first game out, but the Steelers have not been priced up on main slate for this yet. So it's not just that Kenny Pickett individually is a quarterback who's shown to have upside that's expected to throw the football a lot, but it's also good pass catchers that he's going to as far as points per dollar goes. And this for every set, whether it's DraftKings, FanDuel, Owner's Box, Kenny Pickett is going to be one of my, if not my favorite quarterbacks to get to this weekend. And it's primarily because his pass catchers are underpriced everywhere.
I will say that QB +3 ROI scares the shit out of me, though.
Yeah, lots of highly projected QB +3s. And one thing also that I've noticed a lot by building lineups in our Sims tools this year is that it's almost always going to be optimal in these large field tournaments that pay out top heavy. You want to more often than not have multiple pass catchers paired with your quarterback. It doesn't have to be 3, it doesn't have to be 4, but at the very least 2, I think is going to be ideal for the milli makers on DraftKings and FanDuel, as opposed to 1, or certainly more than running them naked.
Which is crazy though, because the last 2 weeks it's been solo stacks. It's been skinny stacks.
Or on FanDuel, where it's just random lineups that have.
Yeah. And of course the sample's so small on these, but it is funny, right? Like I think it was Daniel Jones, right? Daniel Jones single stacks, a skinny stack in week 2. Last week was Cousins, Jefferson, and Allen, I think.
I can't remember now.
I think it was Cousins, Jefferson, and Allen with Keenan Allen on the Jefferson with Cousins, and I think Keenan Allen on the run back. Yeah.
I just remember there was that guy who duped himself that won the milli.
Yes, he did.
Like that's what I remember about the slate last week. I don't remember. And he had what was it? He had 4 of the top 5 lineups. Maybe it was 5 of the top 6.
No, he had first, 3rd, 5th, 12th, 19th, 33rd, 56, 77, and then a bunch of others.
That's running good.
Yeah, you don't say. It was insane. Matter of fact, I'm trying to pull his lineup up now. Yeah, okay, this is what it was. So the Cousins one was a single entry. This was Goff and Laporta stack.
Your guy?
Yeah, with no run back. Tyreek Hill and Raheem Mostert in that game. That's what made the difference. And then he had Keenan Allen, Kenneth Walker, Tank Dell, Adam Thielen, and Bills. I mean, 294.38. 294, Greg, for an NFL slate.
It's a lot. I've run well in the milli maker this year. Like obviously not well enough to win or anything, but I had live lineups in week 1. I had live lineups for a point in time in week 3. So I had one lineup that finished in the top 100 in the milli maker. It wasn't even the lineup that I thought was potentially live, but I looked up at this guy's lineup. It's like, oh, nobody's ever going to catch him. He's got 10 billion fantasy points and he's got like all the top lineups. But yeah, it was as high as a scoring slate as I could remember in recent history.
Absolutely. I don't remember anything other than that. Yeah. Sean Owens, what a way to close out the show. What's up, guys? Took down first place in a single entry last night for $3K using the lineup generator. Hell yeah, dude. Guys, shoot your wins over to us. It's the Stokastic Hall of Fame channel or handle on Twitter. If you don't have an account, create a burner account. Don't matter. And if you're not rocking the avatar, stokastic.com/avatar, right? Just use that, download it wherever it is you play. FanDuel, DraftKings, over on Owner's Box, where you sign up there, you're getting the free week of all of our tools. If you haven't done it yet, rock the Stokastic avatar, join the family, finish top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more. And when you do, you're getting a free month of your choice of any of our tools. And you could win the quarter arcade. It doesn't matter. You could win the nickel. As long as you're top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more, you're not chopping with more than 3 people. Up to $200 value. Any package you want is yours. Plus, you get inducted into the Hall of Fame. We do that ceremony every week in between the deeper dive and live before lock on Sunday. Shout out all of the winners. Just tweet your wins at Stokastic HOF and tag Greg and myself in them too. Even if they don't qualify for the free month, we love to see the big winners. We love to shout you guys out and do the bragging for you. So if you have some big wins, you want them displayed on the big screen, hit us up over there as well. And yeah, lineup generator, whoever mentioned that, it's in the description too. That's the best bang for your buck for any tool, $14.99 or $95 a week. And it's just giving you great lineups, as you can see from that comment. But congrats, Sean. That's really cool, man. Love to see that. All right, Greg, final thoughts on this one. And I'm going to ask you, Jacob, let's pull one more thing up, and then I want Greg to wrap this up for us based around this. How much exposure are we getting? And you can run both of these, throw one up and then throw it. How much exposure are we getting to the Dolphins as a team? And how much exposure are we getting to Bills as a team? Because this total is 5 points higher than anything else on the slate.
Yeah, so at first glance, I remember we were getting to Stephon Diggs in 22.6% of lineups. We had Tyreek Hill in like 10.6% of lineups.
It's on the screen now.
Oh, 10.7. All right. So screw my my
wonky
memory trying to figure. But
team Jacob. You had it right. You just did player instead of team.
Yeah. So let's see. What was you need to do instead of and.
There we go.
All right. So all right, I was close. I was off by a tenth about on Stephon Diggs and Tyreek Hill. So we're getting to a lot of Diggs. We're getting to some of Hill, but like more or less even with the field. But overweight to Diggs, underweight to Hill. But as far as the quarterbacks go, not getting to very much Tua, not getting to very much Josh Allen either. And I don't really have a massive issue with that. I know that this is a game that has a lot of shootout potential, but the players are so expensive that I think it's very prohibitive. And if we look at some of the other quarterbacks that we are getting to, like Kenny Pickett, Jimmy Garoppolo, they're very cheap. We're paying up at wide receiver a lot this week, paying down at running back. Unless a bunch of players get ruled out, which is possible. You mentioned like Deebo Samuel, questionable to play, very iffy. He might not play. That could open up more value. As things stand right now, we don't have like a lot of smash obvious value plays. And the ones we do, it's like, hey, some interest in like Quentin Johnston as wide receiver 2 potentially in place of Mike Williams, exposure to the Pittsburgh pass catchers because Deontay Johnson's out and they haven't been priced up. It's hard to find places to really save salary. And in that situation, I'm not super keen to just go pay up at quarterback and have that use a lot of my salary. So I do prefer, unless things change in terms of value, to go cheaper at quarterback, which ultimately means, I'm going to be underweight to the field on Tua and Josh Allen.
I'm with you. But the nice thing is that when you look at the Diggs exposure, we're over the field on Diggs. We're not much under the field on Tyreek Hill right now either. And obviously those are the two key pieces of this game. Jalen Waddle should be back. So that's one thing. But if you look at Jalen Waddle's price point compared to some of the others, that's a little bit restrictive. Doesn't mean you can't play him, of course. But I love the idea, like you said, of getting the pieces of this game. And I think we're getting around the field and even over the field on some of these guys. It just means that you're probably not stacking Tua with Waddle and Hill and then having nothing else to do. Plus, you want to run that back with Diggs? Good luck. I've already tried it. Your remaining salary is like $3,000 per player, and that's without even putting defense in. So, it makes it tough. But I wanted to look that up just to see where we're coming in. To me, that makes perfect sense. It really does, because stacking that game is going to be very, very difficult. Because with Miami, who else are you stacking with? Durham Smythe would be one of those guys, or you go back to the running back room there. But Those guys aren't discounted anymore. And then with Buffalo, it's Diggs. And then that guys like Davis can have a big game, maybe Kincaid or Knox, but who knows what's going on there. But outside of Diggs, all of those guys, you're hoping for like one long touchdown because the volume, like the 10 target games are just so few and far between anyone not named Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, and then as far as you mentioned the Dolphins running back situation, like I know there's going to be people who ask us questions. You're going to get a bunch of questions about the Dolphins running back when you're doing the deeper dive on Sunday afternoon.
Yep.
I don't know I don't know if Achane or if Mostert is going to be the go-to guy going forward. One thing I know for sure, they're not going to put up 70 points every week. So you start to look at it, it's like this is going to, in the most likely scenario to me is at least in the short term, split running back carries. Both of them are going to be like, because they both warrant touches. They both warrant playing time based on what we've seen from them so far this year. But that's generally a situation we want to avoid. And people are going to be high on it because they both scored 1 million fantasy points last week. It's very unlikely something like that happens, not just the rest of this year for those two, but with any running backs for like the rest of the time we play DFS, and that kind of situation happens.
Without question. It's really easy to get bogged down or on 1 week of games, especially when a team has 2 running backs combined for 8 touchdowns. But there's a lot to like in this slate. I like what the Sims is giving us right now. Miles Sanders, Jameis Winston, maybe that comes down a little bit by Sunday, and to some extent I hope it does, but we'll see. You ready to go record this podcast exclusive episode?
Let's do it. Afternoon podcast.
Yeah, man. Greg and I are going to go break down the afternoon slate. I'm actually very much looking forward to these. We keep it under 30 minutes, usually around 25 minutes. Break it all down. Like I said, if you're not listening today, no big deal. But set a reminder for Sunday afternoon. Get you in and out real quick. You're not going to find this stuff anywhere else. So hopefully it helps. You guys have any suggestions, recommendations for more podcast exclusive stuff that goes up on all platforms for podcasts, hit us up. Let us know. Appreciate you hanging out as always. Follow Greg at G Ehrenberg DFS. Me at Laffy_D. You see it right under our names right there. And shout out to Jacob for producing this one. We'll see you guys back here next week on the Sim Strategy Show. Peace.